So I have never done this before, so please forgive me, but I'm responding to you, Dylan, on your most recent video about Catholics being taking over the majority of Zoomers and all that. I really, really think that you need to take a second look at a few things. I'm coming from the same perspective that you are, just maybe a little bit further in the future, because I was raised in a mega church, evangelical my whole upbringing. Got married, had a kid, tried to get back into it. Tried to go down the more mainline Protestant angle, if you will. Tried a Methodist church, tried Episcopalian, so basically Anglican. A more directly Southern Baptist church that was like associated with the convention and everything. And we found our way to Rome eventually, because you mentioned liberalism a lot in your video, and I don't think that you're thinking of liberalism in an American context as though it's one end of it's on the opposite end of the spectrum as conservatism. But if you try to put it in more philosophical terms, you're talking about a philosophy from the Enlightenment that includes these inalienable God-given rights. Doesn't mention the God, just which God or which version of God or anything like that. Hands-off, do no harm approach from the government, freedom for all kind of thing, right? Both parties are liberal in that perspective, and both sides are liberal from that perspective. But within this context, I think it's important to note that Protestantism evolved alongside the Enlightenment, and therefore it evolved alongside philosophical liberalism. Not the modern day version that you're talking about, but like the more grander, big picture, if you will. And it's really hard to separate. And I remember I had a few, but one of my major aha moments was, I'm a philosophy nerd, okay? So I was reading some philosophy. It was Carl Schmitt, and he was criticizing our concept of law, okay? And basically, his argument is law is just words on a paper, okay? It is absolutely impossible for whoever's writing that law to write it in a way that covers every possible activity or behavior that you are trying to govern. And because it is impossible to cover every possible future scenario, the law is not objective in the sense that it can cover everything. So the law is not, it's not possible for it to stand alone on its own framework. You need courts to interpret it. You need legal precedent to guide the court in interpreting the law. You need these things to happen, or it's just it's just words on a page that mean nothing. And I applied that to Sola Scriptura and what we have seen take place since it was invented, basically. And I have seen Protestants in churches that I was in growing up split over their interpretations of the Bible, because it's a free-for-all. And essentially what it did, to stay with the legal framework of what I was saying, is it's the equivalent of taking the Constitution, abolishing, if the Catholic Church is, it doesn't fit perfectly, but you'll get the analogy. The Catholic Church was, the magisterium is the Supreme Court, tradition is precedent, and the Bible is the Constitution. And what Protestantism essentially did was abolish the Supreme Court and all legal precedent, hand out a bunch of pocket constitutions, and said, there you go, you'll all figure it out. And I think that we can both agree that if you did that, you would have a very chaotic society. It would be, everyone is literally doing what's right in their own eyes because they're their own authority as they pull out their pocket constitution and try and figure out what they can do in the business world with property rights, or what they can do in every other conceivable way, right? Especially in leadership, like I can twist it into whatever I want, and who's declaring war, what taxes I can and can't do, and all that, because there's no court who's going to stop me. I'm twisting it to whatever. So that understanding led me to realize just how without anchor the Protestant churches are, and I extend that to evangelicals too. Obviously, they're even further down that line. But I hope that was a meaningful response that makes you think for a moment, because at the end of the day, without authority, there's nothing holding you together, and there's no like solid clergy. There's no pope equivalent. There's no even if you want to like extend that to the Eastern Orthodox, I mean, there's not even bishops in most Protestant churches. I know the Anglicans still have them, but you get the idea. Who's telling people no? Who's telling people yes? Who's if someone comes up with a wild interpretation of the Bible, to extend that liberal framework of the individualism and rights and all that, who's to tell you your interpretation of the Bible is wrong? You're an individual. You're your own authority. You have rights because you're made in the image of God, and therefore have the rights that He bestowed, even though that was just come up with a few hundred years ago. So anyway, I applaud you for the thoughts that you're having and the path that you're going down. I don't think there's going to be a way to save Protestantism from its own foundational framework. God bless.